I'm Bhavedhir V. Bharadwaj. Welcome to episode 31 of Genesis of Tomorrow. The following is going to be a conversation about search for extraterrestrial life, groundbreaking innovations in ocean and atmospheric exploration, and much more with Dr. Richard Cloete, a computer scientist at Harvard University and University of Cambridge researcher, and now the CEO of Seeker. Also, if you are interested in such conversations about deep science and deep tech and are able to garner even the slightest bit of value from the show, please support us by clicking that subscribe button so that we can keep improving the quality of the episodes and keep on bringing such wonderful guests over for you. And now, without any further ado, let's get right into it. Enjoy and thank you. And we're rolling now. Okay, first of all, again, welcome to the show, Dr. Cloete. Uh, there are a few different matters and aspects that I have found extremely interesting about your work over the years. Starting with, let's start at the earliest point, right? From research to industry, that pivot that you made. But let's start with your involvement in the Galileo project. And before that, straight up, getting to the point, cutting the chase, how much do we know about extraterrestrial life? What all do we know and how do we know?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here today. It's a privilege to speak with you. My background is computer science. I originally was obviously working in industry for a while and then transitioned over to academia. And my academic career has varied a lot as well. I started with things like accountability and compliance back in Cambridge University in the UK. I did remote rendering during my PhD in the UK as well. And then when I came over to the US, I've been doing a lot of artificial intelligence for the Galileo project. So the Galileo project is essentially a scientific project dedicated to the collection and analysis of data relating to potential uh, unidentified air phenomenon. Okay, now we're not looking at historical reports. Um, we're not looking at historical data. We're taking a different approach. In this case, we are building our own sense apparatus, a suite of instruments that we deploy to the ground. They comprise things like infrared cameras, all sky cameras, microphones monitoring various wavelengths. We look at monitoring electromagnetic spectrum as well. So everything we can possibly try and measure, we try to capture. And the idea is that if there is something unusual in the sky that shouldn't be there, our instruments should pick it up, and then we should be able to compare those data points of that anomalous object versus the known performance envelopes of current technology or animal life, they say, or other life, weather phenomena and stuff like that. And in that way, we hope to differentiate between known objects and unknown objects. My work is mostly focused on the AI side of things. So I am building the models that do the detection and tracking of the objects through the sky. And so we pick up a lot of things like birds and airplanes. Um, and then ultimately, we want to be able to move towards anomaly detection to try and filter out. We know these are birds and those are airplanes and balloons and things like that, but we're not interested in those. We want to know about the unknowns. Um, and in terms of knowledge of extraterrestrial life, I guess we don't really know much because, well, you know, we don't have any samples here. We only have planet Earth, a sample of one. We haven't detected any microbes on other planets or rocks, so we can't really say anything definitive about life on other planets or extraterrestrial life. At this point, all we can do is speculate. Um, we have had obviously a few whistleblowers come forward. There's been a lot of interest around the UAP subject in recent years, probably since around 2017, when the New York Times report was published, along with those three Navy videos. US Navy videos. Uh, and there's been congressional hearings, and all this has kind of helped remove some of the stigma around the subject. But at this point, despite all this progress, we still don't have actual physical data in the hands of scientists to analyze, to cooperate, and to try and explain. And that's part of the key process in any form of discovery. Uh, so I'm looking forward to, at some point, getting my hands on some of the data.
Uh, Apart from just processing the signals, it took it up a notch by also looking for physical evidence, right? And as you talked about, after the 2017 entire things that came up within the American Navy and all the congressional hearings that took place afterwards, do you think the entire perspective about this discussion of extraterrestrial life being a part of fringe science or the woo woo elements of it, that is somewhere being corroded and the matter is becoming a little more, is being taken a little more sincerely and seriously?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole landscape has shifted dramatically. I mean, I've been following the UFO subject uh, for more than 30 years. Okay, and there's a lot of periods of time where you get some buzz in the media. There's some new whistleblower that's come forward, or some report that's come out, but then it dies down. So there's been these waves. But 2017, I think, was a pivotal point, because that report, that article published in the New York Times, really set the tone. And it also, it was backed up by some official videos from the Navy, despite them, not initially being admitted to from the Navy. It was only later that they were admitted that they were genuine videos. And then since then, we've had congressional hearings with people testifying under oath about the existence of non-human intelligence, is what we're calling them now, because nobody, people don't want to say that they're extraterrestrial, because that implies that it's not, that it might be from another planet, for example. So they want to try and leave open the idea of what they are or where they might be from, and so that's why they're using the term non-human intelligence. But yeah, so things have shifted dramatically. There's still some stigma. A lot of people, I would say most people just kind of ignore the subject. They've got so much going on in their lives, they don't really have time to think or care about whether there might be other forms of life around them. They're busy focused on their own life, and that's fine. But there are some people who are also very focused on the UFO subject, but for some reason are incredibly hostile towards it. Um, and I don't know, what those reasons might be. I mean, we can speculate. Some of it might be to do with religion. Some of it might be to do with their own, personal view of the world and reality, and they don't want to disrupt their view. And then others like myself and like you and uh, the people who testified, and everyone else, uh, we're on the other side of the spectrum. We're more open to the possibility that not everything that we see is is necessarily, you know reality. There might be things that are hidden from our senses, that we just haven't been able to detect yet with our own senses. And so, yeah, I think even though stigma still exists, it has definitely eroded a lot since 2017. The work that everyone's been doing over those few years to just bring the conversation to the table and say, hey, look, yes, this is a bit weird. We haven't got all the answers, but there's something going on here. Let's just listen. Let's just talk and listen to each other. I think finally we're at that point now where scientists are even starting to take some interest, and so you're seeing projects like the Galileo project. Then you have the Soul Foundation, and there's a few other projects out there as well in universities. So yeah, things are progressing really well. I'm very happy with the pace.
How does the scientific side of things look like? Because oftentimes what people miss while making the argument of rejecting this entire discussion is that they forget that there are scientists who are working with scientific equipment and scientific temperament and scientific rigor while they are trying to just be open to the possibility of something else, not extraterrestrial but even intra terrestrial intelligence, as you stated, right? So what goes into as a scientist while you are over there researching the entire data that is there? What is the scientific rigor that goes into it?
Well, I guess the first thing you need to do is collect your own data. There's so much data out there already, but the problem is that with second-hand or third-hand or fourth-hand data is that it might have been manipulated. You don't know the exact conditions under which that data was collected. You can't necessarily reproduce your experiments, so you need to have every single possible parameter recorded so that you know without a doubt during your analysis that the steps you're taking to analyze that data are logical and that your conclusions are based in uh, you know um, uh, in robust data. And and so that's what the Galileo project is essentially doing, right? We put in sensors on the ground, we're collecting our own data, but it doesn't just stop there. You have to also make sure that your instruments are highly calibrated. You can't go out there with a regular camera and put it on the ground and go, "Hey, I've got some data." You have to calibrate that camera. You have to do the same thing for your microphones and your magnetometer. You have to make sure that you fully understand your instruments and the way they operate, and make sure that there's no bugs in the system. You know that you're not going to have let's say, for example, one instrument recording with one timestamp and another instrument recording with a different timestamp. Things have to be synchronized. You have to make sure that your instruments are performing optimally, so that when time comes, should you actually capture something on those instruments, you can go back and you can analyze exactly what was happening during that period of time across these multiple different instruments. And then when it comes to writing up your scientific paper, the scientific community is all about um, trying to, when it comes to the review process, let's say, the idea is they have to try and identify issues with your work, so that you can then improve and or defend against the work that you've performed. And that's a great way because it makes sure that the data that the publications that come out, well, in theory it's good, but make sure that the publications that come out are of high quality. That doesn't work all the time, of course, uh, but yeah, ultimately that's the process. You have to have highly calibrated instruments, and that's where we are right now in the Galileo project. We are in the commissioning phase. So we've got some instruments on the ground at multiple different locations, and we are collecting data uh, continuously, well, as much as we can. Depending on, sometimes there might be some downtime, so that we can essentially build up a baseline of location X or location Y, and then the hope is that at some point, if something happens, some anomalous object flies through the sky, there's some unusual event, we will have a baseline of data so we can say, okay, how does that event differ from the normal, the typical type of data that we collect from this instrument at this particular location for this season, for example.
What is the most interesting bit of work that you have been working on as of late?
Um, I would say that's probably the AI, the object detection and tracking algorithms. Just to be able to, I mean, so let me back up a second. When we started with the object detection and tracking task, there was no data sets out there for our purposes. So we went on to places like Hugging Space, and we basically scoured the internet looking for really good data sets that we could use in our object detection and tracking tasks. And yeah, sure, there's data sets out there of airplanes or of birds, but these are typically uh, captured maybe from the sky down, or of birds in the tree, or of airplanes on a tarmac. In some cases as well, the data sets are quite messy because they have images of, let's say, an airplane on a kid's T-shirt, or a bird on a coffee mug, or a cartoon bird, and or balloons, But those are not the kind of images that we're looking for. We're looking for images where the camera is basically on the ground looking up at the sky, and the airplane is flying through the sky, or the bird or the balloon or whatever is up there. So we have like a blue background, or gray background. Um, and so what we did was we built a tool to generate synthetic data. We used Blender 3D and some Python, and we got a bunch of models, open source models, 3D models, and we wrote some code that essentially randomly distributes these 3D models within the virtual view frustum of the camera, and then since we already know the location of those objects within this virtual environment, we can generate a really nice data set of images and labels, and then use that to train our models. So we did that, and that worked remarkably well, and then we had to make some tweaks because we had to tailor it towards our camera, and one of the things was our cameras are mostly infrared, so you can't really generate synthetic infrared images. But we did some tricks, and it worked really well. And then it was also really interesting to see how the tracking algorithms work. So you can actually see, you're not just detecting objects, but you're tracking them through the sky. And so you can work out things like their apparent rate of motion. And we don't yet have distance, but that's something that we're actively working on, trying to perform triangulation, so we can get the distance to the object, and then we can get its size, and then from there we can actually measure its proper speed.
What about your deep water exploration aspect of your work? What are the two things primarily? What
Mhm.
are the overlap in technologies that is required for atmospheric exploration and outer space exploration, and also underwater exploration? Because assuming that both these turfs are essentially require you to venture out into extreme environments, there must be some overlap in the kind of basic core that you work with. And if yes, how does it work? If no, again, how does it work?
So there's not really much overlap in terms of, let's say, uh, um, mitigation for extreme environments. There's actually three strands of my work. So one of them is Galileo project, as you know. The other one is a research on interstellar objects, and there we are. I'm working with the Minor Planet Center and building algorithms to detect, or let's say flag rather, potential uh, interstellar objects in space. So we're looking at data coming from telescopes like the Vera Rubin telescope, which is going online shortly, and trying to just monitor all the data and flag possible ISOs, interstellar objects. And if we manage to find one, then we can send do follow-up observations, and get additional data on that object to understand whether it truly is of interstellar origin. That's a separate strand of work, and then uh, the ocean work that you mentioned. That's a startup that I've launched. The company is called Seeker, and this is essentially like the Galileo project, but on water. So the idea here is that I've learned a lot while being at the Galileo project, and I wanted to move some of that knowledge and skills that I developed over to the marine domain. And the reason for that is because UAP reports are very often accompanied by reports of them being around water. So you saw the three US Navy videos. Um, those all involve water. You'll often hear of UFOs uh, buzzing warships, or being under the water, or going from their sky and into the water, or just events like that. And it occurred to me, of course, that there's very little monitoring at sea. We do have lots of buoys, and we have um, uh, manned vessels out there all collecting data. But the ocean is huge. It's 7% of the Earth, okay, is covered by ocean, and 80% of that is not explored. So 5% of the ocean in total has been explored. Just 5%. Uh, so there's really a massive gap there in terms of knowledge and situational awareness. And I realized, like, if nobody's looking, how are we ever going to find anything that's going on around the ocean? Who knows? Maybe there's a lot of activity of UAP out there. It's just we never monitor it, and so we never get to hear about it. And the only people who do really hear about it are the military, because they're the ones out there with the high tech equipment on the water. So that kind of makes sense. So let's go and monitor. And I realized that it's so expensive to do anything out on the ocean. It's just a difficult environment. Um, it's not very populated, of course. There's not a huge demand in terms of the number of services and products that you would find on Earth, on land rather. And so, how could I fund research for monitoring UAP at sea? And then I realized that we'll probably need to build a business around this. And the idea essentially is to build a network of uncrewed surface vehicles. So these are, you can think of like a surfboard. Ours will be a more of a pontoon shaped thing, but uh, you can think of them as a floating ocean observatory. They've got a bunch of sensors on them, and they're monitoring the sky, the ocean surface, and the water below. And they're doing object detection, tracking, and characterization. Um, they're also collecting a bunch of data related to the environment around them, like the weather data, climate data, oceanography data. And when you have a network of them, you have essentially eyes across the entire ocean, situational awareness grid. And so that's what we're trying to build. We're trying to build this network of USVs. We've already got some AI models able to do the object detection and tracking on the ocean. And at the moment, we're looking to build our platform out a bit better, so that we can start deploying instruments onto the ocean. We're still in the design and build phase.
What are, apart from the ones that you mentioned, what are the challenges that you have come across while navigating the ocean exploration phase of your work? And what kind of development, the R&D aspect of technology, have you undergone and developed essentially to cater to those challenges?
I would say the biggest challenge so far has really just been with funding, because we've already got a decent team. It's just that we're all working, full-time jobs, and it's really difficult to make a lot of progress quickly when your life is consumed by your day job. Um, but despite that, we've got some design work already going in for our prototype platform. We've put the website out. We've managed to secure some funding only for the development of the platform, but that's critical. Once we've got that, then we can put that in front of investors, and we can help communicate the idea a lot easier. Like I said as well, we've also made a lot of progress with the AI. So we do already have a model that is able to ingest video feeds and detect and track ships and buoys and other objects on the ocean. And we're looking to expand that to be able to detect and track objects in the sky, and then ultimately under the water as well. We don't have a ton of sensors that we've worked with at the moment for this project, but we're focusing for the time being mostly on the computer vision side of things, and then we'll expand through to acoustics, maybe hydrophones, and weather data as well. And we've also got ADS-B data. So ADS-B is essentially the ability to it's a sensor which allows you to track aircraft. So every aircraft broadcasts these ADSB messages, and we have a receiver which allows you to receive those messages, and it tells you, if there's an aircraft within a certain range, altitude, the origin and destination of the aircraft, and that will just help us uh, to filter out known objects. So if our AI detects something in the sky, we can go, "Hey, was there an airplane over there?" And if there was, then we can say, "Okay, it's just an airplane. Ignore it." Otherwise, pan, tilt, and zoom the camera at the object of interest. Um, yeah, so those are the main challenges that we've had so far. Um, uh, what was the rest? Or did you have any other question on that? Sorry.
No, that catered to what I asked. But what do you think about the society at large, the current state of society? Are we focusing on the right matters? Like it's a general question, not related to any particular matter, but like in general. Do you feel we are aligned at large as the global population towards the right problems or challenges? What are the matters that we must focus on?
In terms of UAP, or
In terms of general human existence, discovery, scientific, or in regard to the universe?
well, I guess it's hard to pick any one issue. There's so many problems, but I would say one of the challenges I see that's really an immediate threat, not just to some particular nation or particular people or whatever, but to everyone. I think that might be artificial intelligence. And I'm not saying it's going to take over and kill everyone and go completely crazy and we're going to have Terminator. No, but it is really going to disrupt everyone's lives. You see, ChatGPT uh, has not been out for very long in the grand scheme of things. Like 3 or 4 years or something that we've actually had decent models. Um, and things have already changed so much. You can already write code with these models. It can help you with research. It can draw images for you. It's disrupting so many industries, and then you've got so many other companies coming out, popping out of nowhere, like overnight. You've got DeepSeek. You've also got Anthropic, which is another major player. You've got Google. You've got Apple. You've got Microsoft. You've got Amazon. Everyone is all like invested in AI, and we're seeing remarkable progress. And what's going to happen is a lot of people's lives are going to be upended because they're not going to be needed really for their work. You're not going to need somebody to enter your data into a spreadsheet, or you're not going to need someone to um, be your social media expert. Communicating online, because it can all be handled by maybe an AI chatbot. Um, there's just so many areas where jobs are going to just disappear overnight, basically, and be replaced through AI, and that's going to cause a lot of issues, and people need to be prepared for this. They need to start thinking about how these advances in AI might impact their lives in the near future, and what they can do to prepare for those changes, whether it be retraining their skill set, starting a new business, um, or I don't know. I don't know. It's difficult to say. It's such a new unknown area right now. I think people haven't really had time to properly digest and understand the implications that AI is going to have on their lives. Um, but we don't have time. Things are
Mhm.
advancing so quickly because every single tiny improvement in AI or in hardware that might impact AI is going right back into AI research. So we're expecting massive rates of progress, unlike anything we've seen before.
Is it a situation where because we do not have a definite way to predict what the future would be like, we must sit where we are and hope for the best? Or is there something that people at individual level, on an individual level, can do to make sure that they are in some way or form mitigating the uncertainty that is attached with the exponential growth in technologies like artificial intelligence, in order to secure their any aspect of life?
Yeah, I would say don't just sit around and watch what's happening with AI. I would say try every single AI tool you can. Some of them, of course, you have to pay for, so it's understandable if you can't try everything. But if you can, try try every AI tool. Try to understand what the capabilities are. Try and see the trends, see how things are moving, and then constantly along that journey as well of discovery, try and reflect and think, how is that going to impact me in the future and my ability to perform my job, and what I can do to either secure my job in the future or shift to another line of work to secure my income. Uh, Probably the governments are going to have to move over to universal basic income or something like that. But I mean, that's another, a big unknown whether that's even possible. Uh, but yeah, I would recommend that. Just try the tools, see what's possible, see how you can use them. Make sure that you're using them. Practice with them, because if you're not using AI, the person using AI in the future is going to be the one to replace you before the AI eventually replaces you. So, you know, make sure that you're actually able and competent with AI tools to make you competitive in a already and increasingly competitive job market.
Um, I did not. Okay, I'm sorry to go back to the point where we started this entire conversation, but there's just something that is lingering in my head. After the Navy videos, right, that got out, and the sessions that took place, the formal proceedings that took place, has there been? It's been a little while. It's been a long while. I mean, a decent while. Has there been any definitive, conducive conclusion of the matter? Do we know what things are, or what the matter even was in the first place? And if not, then why? I mean, something that we do not understand, and something that, if true, would invariably spark scientific curiosity, but the curiosity of somebody who even is not of the scientific field in general as well. Why is there no buzz around it right now?
So I guess the first question is what. Well, the first question I'll answer is, why is there no buzz around it? So it's hard to say. I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think it's just because people are so busy with their lives that they don't pay much attention to UAP. They have kids to feed, they have mortgages to pay, they're stressed at work, they're stressed at home. They're constantly bombarded on the media about how the world's going to end and everyone's going to go to war. They're constantly distracted, and they're not. This is just another thing on the side. And for many years, decades, they've always been told that it's all a load of nonsense. That there's nothing to see there. That there's just crazy people running around making stuff up. And so I don't. Uh, I don't I don't think it's unusual for so many people to be ignoring the subject. Um, and well, sorry, what was the second question?
It was just upon the same matter at large. It was just, firstly, why not the bus? The second one being an extension to it. How would it change the human narrative if things along those lines come out to actually not be a load of crap, but something that is actuality?
Hmm.
manifested in physical reality. I mean, with the kind of world that we are living in, artificial intelligence, robots, which is only going to intensify, people thought about it as just piece of science fiction decades back, 2 3 decades back. Sure, there was a part of scientific community who was working towards manifesting that reality, and I think the same could be said for this as well, right? And not even talking about extraterrestrial life, because I think that was a very brilliant point brought up by you very in the very initial phase of the conversation. We do not even really know the entire everything about Earth, the planet that we've been inhabiting for as long as we have been here,
Hmm.
from whatever we know so far. I mean, it seems like a extremely undervalued and undermined topic in general, and call it ignorance being a bliss, people being so engrossed with their everyday chaos of life and society. But how do you see if something like this actually comes out into the broad daylight? How do you see humanity taking it, reacting to it?
Well, I think it's not going to be so much of a reaction, and the reason for that is because I don't think uh, the disclosure is what we call it. You know, the disclosure of non-human intelligence. It's not a single pivotal event. It's a process, and so what you see is through uh, decades we've had um, films from Hollywood. We've had news stories, reports coming out from in the media, and essentially it's been a desensitization campaign, in my opinion. One that gets people familiar with the idea of aliens and that there might be life out there and comfortable with that. And then eventually, we start moving towards, we have hearings in Congress, we have videos coming out from Navy, we have the Pentagon releasing reports saying that they've identified most of the stuff, but there's a little tiny bit of stuff that they just couldn't figure out. So there's still that possibility. And all that's doing is just conditioning everybody to the point where they're not so freaked out about the idea that there might be life on another planet, or that there might be some other form of intelligence interacting with the planet that we maybe can't perceive, that maybe in a different, oh gosh, I don't even know the right terminology here, because we have only our five senses, and it might just be beyond our five senses. uh, and so yeah, it's not unusual to me, I think, for people to feel that way. But I think that at some point a lot of people will start to realize that there is something really unusual going on here, and that we more than likely are not alone. And if you listen to people like Cornell, Lou Elizondo, David Grush, and the new whistleblower, Jake Barber, these guys are all very senior, high-ranking former military intelligence officers, officials, and they've all told us that there is non-human intelligence here right now interacting with the planet. And I think at some point everyone is going to maybe come to that same conclusion and agree with that statement. And how it's going to impact people, it's hard to say. I think we will kind of just adapt as things go. Some people might be very freaked out when it finally clicks in their head. It might disturb their view of religion, or their place in the universe, and their own meaning of life. There are going to be people that are extremely sensitive to this kind of knowledge. Um, but I think the vast majority of people are going to just kind of take it on the chin and go, okay, well, we kind of knew it already anyway. Um, why would we think that we're so special and that we're the only ones out here? Uh, and so for a lot of people, I think it's not actually going to impact them too much, um, on a personal level. Uh, yeah. if
Coming,
handled correctly.
yeah, yeah. Uh, Coming back to the matter of artificial intelligence, since you've been working in this domain from a very technical, with a very technical background, where do you think that AI? Uh, okay, how can one how can one utilize artificial intelligence in a way that bolsters their all over prolificacy of their workflow? And sure, it's essentially, you mentioned, you briefly touched upon it while you were talking about using AI tools and all that. But as somebody who's working with artificial intelligence, and it's different from using AI tools, I know, but still, how can a normal person, a student, a researcher, somebody who's working in 9 to 5, a corporate job, whatever it may be, how can one, in accordance to their own personal workflow, integrate artificial intelligence to whatever extent they can in order to just become an asset for whatever work that they are, or whatever value that they are adding to the client, the company, the customer, whoever?
Mhm. Well, I guess it varies across people and industries, but one common theme I would suggest is using these chatbots like Claude or ChatGPT or DeepSeek or whatever to help with things like um, constructing emails, for giving you ideas and insights into planning. If you have to plan an event, for example, for work, then consult with the AI. Maybe it can tell you, what you need to be thinking about, and you can interact with it and ask questions. If you have data that you need to be entered into a spreadsheet, don't spend hours manually doing that yourself. Let the AI do that. Um, if you've got code and you need to document it, don't spend an hour or 2 hours documenting your code. Just give it to the AI and have the AI document your code. Um, just interact with. Yes. So in terms of integrating AI into your workflow, it depends on your particular job, uh, um, and what you're doing. But I would suggest just speaking with the chatbots, for example, even as you would a normal human being. Ask them questions. Use them as a way to as someone to consult with. So if you are writing an email, have it check your spelling or improve the flow. If you are entering data into a spreadsheet, don't sit for hours and do that manually and risk making mistakes. Let the AI do that. If you are trying to do some coding and you have a problem with coding, don't scour the internet for ages, uh, fighting pop-ups and adverts, just and then trying to rack your brain trying to understand how to tackle a problem. Ask the AI. It'll if it doesn't give you the code, it'll at least help you understand how to tackle that problem. If you have stuff that you need to document, let the AI document it. Don't waste your time documenting it. So think of how in everything you do, how maybe AI can do it for you and save you some time. Because the more free time you have, the more time you can do something else, or maybe not even work related. Maybe you can have more time for yourself, for your family. Um, and then, of course, if you can even take it a step further into things like marketing. You can, rather than having someone develop draw images, you can have the AI generate your image, or a video. Rather than having someone put together a video, you can do it with AI. You can do things like dictating to the AI. It'll recognize your speech, and it'll put it out into text. Um, there's so much you can do, but one thing I would recommend everyone does is try and document everything that you do. So if you are, let's say, your emails, like, try and keep track of all your emails, try and keep track of everything you write, things that you do during the day, uh, things that you're thinking about or planning, all this information at some point will be accessible by AI. And unless the AI has access to that information, it's not going to know what you want to do, what you're trying to do, what you need. Um, so you can, as a good example, my wife is a scientist, and at her work, she's really good at keeping lab books. So her lab book is essentially a diary for the laboratory, and it details the the protocols that you've used, the experiments you performed, why you performed the experiment, why you were thinking this, when it happened. Essentially, like a logbook, a diary, okay, for the lab. And she was able to take her lab books from 5 years ago, for example, and upload it to the AI and interact with those documents, those lab books. She could ask it, which date did I do X, or why did I do Y? Can you think of additional experiments based on the previous experiments I've performed? So you can really do things that you just would not be able to do before. And unless, as I mentioned earlier, unless people are just constantly interacting and trying out these new AI tools, you're not going to understand how best to integrate it to your workflow, and then you'll lose your competitive advantage. So
Uh,
interact and experiment.
DeepSeek dropped out, and it annihilated disrupted the entire market, right? And now, whatever it may be, propaganda or narrative, as some facets are saying, it was a side project of the owning company. And do you think innovation is something that is still maybe not being emphasized as much in certain respects? What is the way to be able to constantly at the top level of performance keep on innovating even after you've built something extremely good? Because oftentimes the pitfall that people generally fall into, people, institutions, organizations, once they've built something which was ingenuine, it was creative, it was efficient, and it was novel, the progress of innovation declines a little bit or just plateaus. How do people make sure that they are working at the top level of creativity and are constantly working towards building or creating something novel or better, driving innovation further and further?
Um, well, I guess one thing is to just keep on track of your competition. Competition is a key ingredient to progress. Without it, we would just plateau, as you mentioned. People would uh, not be not be trying to innovate, not to outdo each other. I think one of the best ways we can make sure that we don't plateau and continue to innovate is to continuously assess our competition. Competition is a key ingredient in innovation. Without it, you don't have um, people or teams trying to outdo one another. You don't have people. You don't force people to think creatively and competitively. And so, just continuously monitoring competition and competing as we do, I think that will ensure a constant drive of progress. And then, as weird as it sounds right now, but in the future, I think AI might play a big role in innovation. I mean, we're going to start to see AI helping in the medical industry with developing drugs. Um, in the engineering industry, designing new chips, we already start to see AI is helping design new chips. Uh, Writing its own code, AI is going to be writing software. I think the CEO of Anthropic recently said that by 2027, people won't be writing code anymore, and I completely agree with that. I think it's almost certain. Just the rate of progress we're seeing is phenomenal, and AI is actually playing a big role in writing my own code in a lot of cases. Uh, so so yeah, I think just constantly competing and looking for ways to innovate is going to be the best way forward, and ultimately interacting with AI, because that's going to be a big driver of progress itself.
Overall, the energy required to maintain and sustain these technologies is immensely high, and that would invariably lead us to either find alternatives or develop alternatives for the immense energy requirements of these technologies. Where do you think we are currently standing in that regard?
You mean in terms of progress toward developing enough energy to power the AI?
Yes.
I don't think we have any major issues on the horizon. I think nuclear power is not utilized enough. Everything, a lot of gas and coal-fired power plants are still in operation. Um, Solar as well is not harnessed enough. Um, I don't think we're going to lack for energy. I think the problem is that we just need to plan well and be careful in our strategy to make sure that uh, with the rapid rate of increase and proliferation of AI, that we are able to meet those energy demands. Um, but from a technological point of view, I don't think we don't have any limitations on that front. It's just really about infrastructure and prioritizing the development of that infrastructure in an AI age.
What has been the most unprecedented thing that you've observed all throughout your career up until now, up after constantly being analyzing and observing so much data in various different terrains and environments? What is the most unprecedented thing that people will be surprised to know?
Hmm. The most unprecedented, did you say?
Yes. Hmm.
Um, that's a good question. I don't really have an answer for it. Hmm. I guess back to AI, people would just be, well, and also UAP. I think people would be uh, very surprised to see how much AI can actually already do, but how much it will be able to do in the future. I think a lot of people are kind of ignoring, they had their head in the sand. They're ignoring how AI is going to essentially be able to do anything a human can do, um, and do it faster and more accurately and do it forever, continuously, no breaks in between. Um, so I don't think people are paying enough attention to that. And then on the UAP side of things as well, I think we're getting to a point where uh, it'll be widely known enough that non-human intelligence exists, and that might um, come as a surprise to a lot of people. So I would say those two things.
Have you personally ever come across any evidence in regards to the existence of non-human intelligence? I mean, surely the evidence that has been submitted, but like directly through your direct work and research.
No, the whole point of Galileo project, as I mentioned earlier, is to collect data and let the data speak for itself. And we published our papers on the data that we have, but that's it's because it's still early stages of the project, so we're still doing the development and commissioning of the instruments. So we haven't at this point been collecting any, I would say, scientific quality data that uh, is ready for making any sort of conclusions about what is flying in the sky or what might not be flying in the sky. At this point, the data, although it's already very, very high quality, and in some regards it is scientific data, it's just it's commissioning data. It's for us to understand our instruments and the environment. So in all that data, of course, we've seen some unusual things. I can say that we've seen an object fly into the sky, into the view of the camera, sit and hover for a minute, and then move up and then hover a bit more for another minute, and then fly away. But the important thing to remember is that uh, in a lot of these cases, we just have a single camera running, or we don't have any other additional instruments because it's just test environment. It's just us testing our instruments, and so we don't have enough data to make any definitive conclusions. We don't have multiple cameras triangulating the object, so we can't tell whether the object is far away and large or very close and tiny. Um, and without that information, we can't measure speed. Um, and we don't necessarily have accompanying acoustic data, so we can't tell, for example, if this white dot in the video frame is a drone or a bird. Um, so although we have seen some, let's say, unusual things in the data, uh, we've never seen any data yet where we can, okay, this is completely unusual. I have no idea what this is. I don't even have an explanation for it. We've always been able to say, okay, that's more than likely a bird, or that's almost certainly a drone, or that's just a leaf that's been blown from the wind from a tree, across the camera. Um, but I'm hoping that as funding comes in, as we start to put up more sites, and as we start to deploy our anomaly detection algorithms, well, develop and deploy them, that we will start to see very unusual things that we just can't explain. And at that point, we'll have we'll have multiple instruments all corroborating data points, so we can make definitive statements.
I think it's also partly attributed towards, as you also mentioned, the lack of sheer expansiveness in terms of the implementation of this research and equipments to observe the surroundings. Because I feel, and it's often said in a very how do you say, butt of a joke kind of a manner, that all these things, they are only being done in America. American government is the only one who's going through all of this. But actually the truth is that in reality, American government and American institutions are the only one who are actually being taking the initiative to invest in these research and development. Because I don't think any other nation or institution is as heavily investing into this, not openly at least. The knowledge isn't out in the public domain. And I think that, as you again stated, with time and with the growth in the allocation of resources, manpower, and the sheer geographical expansion, I think the results will eventually be brought about by all of these things.
Yeah, so it's obviously not just the U.S. government. We we know that China is already using AI to process its data, looking for and analyzing UAP. They've already released there was something in the media about that. Um, there was the Cometa report, the French UFO report. Um, in the past, we know that the Brazilian government has been involved as well. There's lots of the UK. The UK has released files from the Ministry of Defence, the MOD. There's a lot. There's been a very clear effort um, around the world of governments trying to release information, but the US is definitely the ones who's kind of leading the charge. Let's say they're the ones who've had the congressional hearings, who've passed the UFO Disclosure Act. Um, they're the ones who's trying to really push this topic open, and I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because maybe America being the superpower of the world, maybe they are the ones who are leading the disclosure effort, and it's at their pace. I'm not sure, but it's definitely a phenomenon which is happening all around the world. Even in my home country, South Africa, we know we've had the Ariel school case, and there's been some others. So I would say that while the US is kind of is leading the charge, there is a lot of stuff happening in other countries. They're making they're definitely using AI and trying to collect as much data as they can. They just might not be disclosing it, as you mentioned. They might not be telling everyone, "Hey, we've collected this data. Oh, we were involved in this operation." Um, I don't know why that is. Maybe they must have their own reasons. I don't know.
What is the ideal way or a decent way to get into the business side of things while in a domain that is so scientific and R&D oriented in nature? Because over here there isn't, the product isn't really for customers, for people or businesses, but it's directly related to the scientific growth and the advancement of the know-how of humanity at large, like bringing about outputs and results in forms of scientific discovery. So how does that translate to the former, and how does the entire dynamic in general works?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Are we talking about AI or UFOs?
No, no, no. In general, for example, you have started a business, a company, which
Mhm.
is directly, the work is directly related towards research and development, right? And there isn't a particular product that you are selling, but it's more of exploration and observation and analysis. How does one build and sustain a business that at its core is not selling products to customers or businesses, but rather working in the domain of science and development?
So no, actually, we are building products and services. It's a for profit company. UAP research is a underlying theme that I wish to explore through that company. But the UAP research is expensive. You can't put a bunch of sensors on the ocean and monitor and process the data in the cloud and hire teams to do the analysis without strong revenue streams. And so Seeker, this company, is essentially a two-pronged approach. We will be developing our network of USVs, which will collect a range of data from multiple domains: the skies, the surface of the ocean, and below, um, and a range of data modalities: cameras, um, tracking data, acoustic data, ocean floor mapping, detecting oil spills, a huge range of data. And all this data is valuable. So we'll have data services. We'll also provide access to our USVs, our uncrewed surface vehicles. So we'll have a USV as a service, let's say. So imagine, for example, you are a researcher and you want to monitor or you want to analyze some data from a particular location on the ocean that you don't have access to. So what you would typically do is you would go and you'd write a grant proposal. If you secured the funds, you would then have to go and you'd build your equipment, or you'd have to rent it or buy it, and then you'd have to be responsible for deploying that equipment, collecting the data, retrieving the equipment, analyzing your data. There's a long, involved process there. But now imagine instead of all that, you could get your grant, and then you could come and you pay Seeker, and you could get access directly to data, or you could define your mission parameters, and you get control of one or more of Seeker USVs and go and collect the data yourself without having to worry about uh, deployment or maintenance or collection.
So
We,
essentially, yeah, yeah. So essentially, basically, for anybody who's starting a venture with the core being R&D and research, they have a sort of ancillary service or product through the means of that primary research, right?
yeah, that's right. So the research is almost like you can think of it as a side project. We have a main legitimate business, which is the USVs and the data collection and the services we build around that. And then the UAP side of things is really a personal interest and an interest within the team that while our instruments are out there on the ocean, we're also going to be looking for uh, potential anomalies. So we'll be having algorithms to do the detection and tracking and characterization, but we'll also have anomaly detection algorithms so that if our robots manage to see something that's novel, something new, maybe a new type of fish, maybe a new type of weather phenomena, or maybe a UAP, we'll know, and so in that way, we are both uh, doing a legitimate business and building revenue streams, but also helping support scientific research. And one of the key things I want to do here as well is through Seeker, I want to be able to at some point uh, help support projects like the Galileo project or the Sol Foundation or others, because all these scientific projects rely entirely on donations. There are no revenue streams coming from, let's say, the NSF, the National Science Foundation, or other grant organizations. To do this kind of science, you really have to rely entirely on donations, and that's incredibly difficult. Um, it takes an enormous amount of time for my boss, Avi Loeb, to 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 engage with the media, to go to events and to give presentations and talks and try and raise awareness of the subject and its importance, and to raise ultimately funds. And he's been incredibly successful at that. But it's that's not necessarily going to be sustainable long term. At some point in the future, maybe there won't be anyone who will step forward that's generous enough to hand over some money to further support the project. And then as the subject gets more and more interest, you're going to have competing organizations. So it'll be even more difficult to secure funds. So I'd really like to have, uh, let's say, UAP friendly companies which are taking a portion of their revenue stream and helping support these initiatives like the Galileo project, like Sol Foundation, whether that's through providing for postdocs, additional scientists, through equipment, sharing data with them, um, helping with training, or any other way. I would really like to see companies do that. And so I see Seeker as maybe one of the first of, I hope, many UAP friendly companies. And I think ultimately together we can build this ecosystem that really helps to support and drive the UAP research and science that needs to be done.
Coming to the end of the conversation, the climax of the conversation, there's this last bit that we do in all of our episodes. Dr. Richard, what would be your word to humanity at large?
What's right?
What would be your word to humanity at large?
My word? You mean like
Your message to humanity at large.
um, st- stop fighting? Stop fighting. Just enjoy life and try and whatever you do, think how it's going to impact someone else and whether you can improve whether what you're doing is going to negatively impact someone else's life. Um, be kind. Uh, yeah, stop fighting. Just stop fighting.
I think it's again, just do that, right? But yes, Dr. Richard Cloete, thank you so very much for being on the show. And I loved the way you were able to bring about a very scientific temperament towards a matter that, as we discussed, had a lot of predisposed stigma attached to it, and be able to break it down in a way that is digestible to people who might be coming from a completely different s- side of the spectrum, and be able to understand or entertain the possibility of it. So thank you so very much. It was a delight to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was lovely to meet you. And I should just say as well that we're always looking for additional engineers. So if anyone is out there, or not even necessarily engineers, but if anyone is out there and they'd like to help get involved in either the Galileo project or in the startup Seeker, just reach out. We'd love to chat with you. We could use all the help we can get. This is a new subject, an emerging subject, and it's a great time to get involved.
Thank you so very much.